Hi, Pink Bob here. For the last couple of months, I've been beta testing some amazing new software by Exile called Finalist. Now, Finalist takes your tracks, or stems as I guess they're now called, and helps you get a final mastered mix quickly and easily. As a primary beta tester, I've logged a lot of hours doing actual mixes with Finalist. So I'd like to share my workflow for mixing and mastering a track with Finalist. And not just a little demo song, a live recording of an album side long piece that is pretty involved. And don't worry, we won't be playing the whole thing here. Now, Tim Exile is a genius at building things in Native Instruments Reactor. He's been doing it for years. Finalist is written in Reactor, but it has been encoded to run in the Reactor player, which is totally free. So all you need is a copy of Finalist, the free Reactor player, and the DAW of your choice. I'll be using Ableton Live, but any modern DAW should work similarly. So that's what Finalist is. Here's what it isn't. Finalist is not a DAW. You can't edit or make adjustments to individual parts of tracks, stems. And the control you have of things at the stem level is Spartan, just volume and pan. Finalist can't run any sort of plugins or add effects like reverb or delay, and it has no EQ available, at least in the conventional sense. This is why my workflow with Finalist actually consists of two projects. I call the first one my Premix project, and the second one my Finalist project. Now, if your stems are really consistent and relatively simple, you may be able to bring them straight into Finalist and skip the Premix project altogether. But after mixing quite a lot of material with Finalist, and given the fact that I'm not the greatest engineer in the world, I've never been able to skip the Premix project. Depending on what you're doing, the Premix project might be just a copy of your multi-track studio project, or a fresh project if you're starting with a multi-track live recording like I'm going to do here. Okay, so I wrote this long piece of music for solo live performance called Kawazoi. That's Japanese for along the river or riverside. It was recorded on a Zoom L20, which can record up to 20 tracks at once. So I brought all of the original tracks into a new Ableton Live set. Lots of effects were used for the performance, so they're actually printed on the various tracks. Echoes, reverbs, etc. So that's the bad news. You still have to do some of the pre-production work you've always done, like get your levels adjusted, add effects, all that good stuff. But in a studio recording situation, you're likely doing that anyway, as you go along. And for live tracks, you might find yourself just mostly doing minor level and EQ adjustments. Also, I tend to avoid return buses for things like reverb and echo. I put them on individual tracks instead. My fear has been Finalist is potentially going to really mess with all those individual tracks, and your reverb bus is going to just be another instrument track as far as Finalist is concerned. But after some recent discussion with Tim, I'm going to experiment with this. He says an effects bus should work fine if placed in one of the groups contributing to its content. But Tim explicitly advises against placing effects buses in their own group, like aux, because that's where Finalists will treat them very much like primary instrument tracks. Okay. One thing I found helpful is if I have multiple instruments or patches sharing the same physical track, I'll break those out into their own individual tracks. This gives you more control once you get to the Finalist mix. For Kawazoi, this is happening with both the Osmos and the Taisho Goto tracks, which each contain 3 different patches at various points in the song. So I've broken them all out onto their own tracks to give me more control with them in Finalist. As you can imagine, doing all the premix work on a 14-track, 20-minute live recording can take a while, so I won't bore you here with it. Here's what things look like after doing all of that. playing it back, it sounds pretty good to me for a flat mix. So now we're ready to export our stems to use in our Finalist mix. I like to create a new folder for this and put everything related to the Finalist mix in this folder, including the stems and the Finalist mix project itself, or live set as it's called in Ableton jargon. So here's my new folder called Kawazoi Video Mix. Now I'm going to hit Command A in the arrangement view of Ableton, Control A if you're in Windows, to select all of the waveforms in our Premix project. Then I'll do File, Export Audio and Video, and make sure I select all individual tracks in this drop-down box. Check the settings, those look good, and export. Make sure the target is my new Kawazoi Video Mix folder. I like to always name the export file name here simply stem, and you'll see why in a second. To save time, we're going to skip the progress bars and beach balls when they happen, just to speed things up a little bit. So here's our Finalist mix folder again, and here are the stems we just exported. See, here's why I use the file name stem. Now I have stem1 percussion as a file name, for example. This will make things easier down the road for us. So now for the fun stuff. Finalist. Okay, let's start a fresh Ableton Live set, aka project, and we'll just need a single MIDI track for Reactor or Reactor Player, whichever you have. Load Reactor onto the track, and then within Reactor open your Finalist ensemble. You should then see this screen inviting you to drop your stems on it. So let's see what happens. Grab our stems, we don't need the mains or returns here, and plop them on in there. Finalist is going to temporarily disappear, at least on a Mac, when the DAW loses focus, but it will reappear once again when it regains focus. And again, 14 stems, 20 plus minutes long, will take a moment. Now we're on the Categorize and Adjust Your Stems page. There are 4 groups you can categorize your stems into: drums, bass, backing, and lead, plus a 5th optional group, aux, which we'll get to in just a moment. One thing I've noticed is that the drums and bass groups can be very forward and aggressive with some of the mix presets. So if you want to use these groups for something other than their stated purpose, presets from the soft collection might be a good place to start. I've had some luck with percussive plucky synths in the drums group, for example, on tracks that didn't have any drums or percussion. Few occasions I've just left drums entirely empty for, quieter ambient pieces. So let's categorize and adjust each of the stems into one of these groups based on its function in the song. We are going to be using the aux group, which is initially disabled, so click on Advanced to set that up. Aux is intended to be an extension of one of the other groups to give you additional separation and control. Imagine each of the 4 main groups has its own big pedal board with lots of pedals, lots of settings. Each of the mix presets we're going to see in a bit has very different settings dialed in on each of the 4 pedal boards. So aux lets you have a second copy of one of those 4 pedal boards. So if you select clean for the aux group and it is configured as a lead group, Finalist will use clean's lead pedal board settings for it. On the mixing page, aux gets its own independent controls, including its own mix preset of your choice. I'll typically use aux for a second backing or lead group. For Kawazoi, I have a sampled guitar track that runs through most of the song. It's a pretty important track. So I'm going to configure aux as a lead group and assign my guitar track to that. And you can scrub over stems here to help identify which is which if you've got a lot of stems. The Osmos and Taisho Goto tracks will all go to lead. We'll put, of course, percussion and drums go to drums. This mini mode goes to bass. And everything else is going to be backing. Also note here on the stems page, you have control of volume and panning, plus or minus 12 dB, and panning, which can be helpful if you have one stem that's left output of a drum machine and another for the right output, for example. Okay, now we hit done, and Finalist goes through all of the stems, building histograms of, I think Tim said 60 some different data points that it's going to use for its mixing and mastering decisions. And here we are on the main mix screen. Now, nothing is enabled in Finalist until you click Start or this switch over here. And warning, doing so can significantly boost your playback levels. So turn things way down before you start and then adjust up accordingly. Okay, let's start mixing with Finalist. A few things before we start. Down here we have all of the mix presets grouped into logical categories like essential, balanced, soft, etc. Other than this tone control on the master section, you'll notice there is no EQ available anywhere. But these mix presets can have a dramatic effect on the group's EQ and presence, so keep that in mind. The other thing is, if you hover over a group or module name, you will see a lock icon. These are the group locks, and we're going to make good use of them. Just note that when a group is unlocked its default state, any change of mix preset will change the group to that preset. And initially, all groups are set to even and they're unlocked. So switching from even to slick here changes everything to slick. While that may be what you want to do, it probably isn't. So instead, we're going to solo each of the individual groups, find the mix preset we think works best for it, and then lock it in. And then do the next group, and so on down the line. But first, I always like to lock both cleanup and master onto even so they stay consistent. Remember, if unlocked, both will change to boom if you select boom for your bass group. Maybe not a good choice for your master bus. You could also just turn off cleanup and master with these switches here while setting individual groups, but I prefer just locking them both to even. So other than that, you can move to a specific point in the song if you want with the scrub bar here. You can also turn loop on to just play a short clip over and over while you flip through your mix presets. So let's go to where the drums are clearly in, loop it, and I kind of like Ember. Let's see what it sounds like on just the percussion bit. Yeah, that's good. Let's lock that. Now on to the bass group, which only has one stem assigned to it, that Mini Moog bass patch. Yeah, it's kind of buzzy. Let's find something that doesn't accentuate that. Which brings me to perhaps the most important thing about using Finalist. Use your ears. I know it's a cliche, but with Finalist, it can be a little opaque with what it's doing behind the scenes. And I found the mix preset names can be deceiving at times. So play around, try things, and don't be shocked if Roar ends up sounding best for your backing pads or whatever. Anyway, I like drift here, so lock. Real quick, solo the drums and bass together. Nice. Backing is going to need something on the softer side. There's this, that, and the other in this group, so let's try a few things. Yeah, I like Velvet. Let's lock that. Lead has tons of stuff sharing the group for basically a bunch of little solo sections, one after another. Again, probably something a little gentler. Here's the koto sound. Tender sounds good. Over here we have the choir. Sounds good. Here's the weird Taishogoto double reed sound, supposed to be a little abrasive. Nice. Let's see, the Osmos Grains Pluck patch. Ooh, I like that. Let's lock that one down. That leaves aux, which are the fake guitars. Yeah, maybe something edgier. No, actually that's bringing out too much digital grunge in the high end from the original sample-based instrument, GT4R I think it's called. Yeah, something softer. Loaf is a good start. Lock it. Okay, there are these larger mount knobs. How much processing Finalist is going to do using the assigned mix preset. If things are over-compressed sounding, I'll start by dialing back the main mix knob on the left here. This adjusts all of the amount knobs up or down globally, and they reflect that on the display. For each of the individual groups, experiment to see if it benefits from more or less processing, essentially compression, limiting, EQ, etc. Likewise with cleanup and master. For cleanup, this noise knob, I assume, injects some sort of noise into the sidechain, and it can reduce harshness with certain material when you set it in the 10 to 12 o'clock range, I've found. It's something I always try just to see. And likewise, the tone knob over here on master can brighten or warm your final mix. Use your ears. So now we're down to level adjustments and to see if we can get the mix itself dialed in. First, I like to get everything set with the group gain knobs. You have plus or minus 12 dB to play with here, and it operates on the entire group. Get it as close as you can before we make further adjustments on individual tracks on the stem categorization page. Remember the stems page? Here's a time-saving tip. Every time you go back to that stems page to make an adjustment, volume or pan or category, Finalist must go through the whole analysis phase again. If you're working on a short track with just a few stems, that's probably not a big deal. But something like Kawazoi, that's going to take a moment or three each time. So once I have groups set as closely as possible, I'll go through the entire thing and take notes for what needs to be adjusted on the stems page. So to save time, I've already done that, gone through the whole thing, and taken my notes, and I have a few stems that are too loud relative to the other stems in their group. So let's go fix that. We need to click Stems Setup in the upper right-hand corner to get to the stems page. So let's see, I need to turn the percussion down a little bit here. I thought all of the Taishogotos sounded good. We're gonna turn that river sound down just a little bit. Maybe turn that koto down just a little bit. Weird woodwind things need to come down a bit. Maybe the first Osmos patch down a little bit. So I've gone through now and made all of these adjustments. All right, and now we'll click done and reanalysis time. And back to the mix. Here's a good place to share something that Tim clarified for me recently. Pulling everything down within a group up or down by the same amount in stem categorization, that won't have much or any effect. This is because Finalist detects the overall level for everything in the group, and it compensates for it during analysis. And I've noticed this behavior. If you cut all the drum group stems by 3 dB, all of them at the same amount, you don't get a corresponding 3 dB cut in the mixing page because analysis boosts the whole group's level up to where the mix preset says it should be. So these stem categorization level controls, they're basically used to change the level of multiple stems in the same group relative to each other, not the group as a whole. Back to our mix. There are two things that are bothering me that I can't fix here in Finalist. One is this guitar passage here is too quiet relative to everything else on the same guitar track. And the other is that I want the field recording of the river to drop volume much more when it drops. So we have to go back to the premix project to do that. So let's save our Finalist mix project and prepare to go back to our premix project for these adjustments. Even more so than stem level adjustments, this takes time and is tedious. So try to take notes and do everything you have to do in as few trips back to premix as possible. Fortunately, we only have two things to fix here. The first is the guitar passage. Here it is, right here. So I should just be able to tweak it with the volume envelope like so. 2 dB sounds about right. So before moving on, let's re-export this track. Now we need for this replacement track to be the same length and format and name as the one it's replacing. Use Command A or Control A in Windows to see what to select, and then select the same length you had for the initial export, like so. And now we'll export a fresh version of that guitar track. Make sure this time you choose Selected Files Only. And make sure you're going to your Finalist Mix folder. You should see your stems here that Finalist is using here in this premix project. So I want to just single click on the old original guitar track stem to make sure I get the exact same name and replace that with the new version. And yes, replace. Now we'll do the adjustment on the river sounds real quick. Export the new version of it the same way. And save our premix project that now has our little adjustments in it. And now load up our Finalist project again, our mix project. This doesn't take long, which is a clue it hasn't gone through a fresh analysis of the stems we just changed. So let's force it to do that, or it will be going off of the old saved data. Just go back to the stems categorization page and click Done to force a reanalysis. And we're back to mixing right where we left off. Except now see the river has receded where I want it to. And let's see, that guitar is right where I want it. Sweet. Now remember, cleanup and master are still locked, so let's unlock cleanup and see if it can do anything to help us out. Everything else is still locked, so let's see if changing the mix preset for cleanup can improve things here. Nice. I actually like bang. Odd. Well, use your ears. Okay, lock cleanup and unlock master. I'm thinking something softer. Let's try over here in soft. I like Galaxy. Very nice. Lock it. So I've dialed in my mix from top to bottom. I like what mastering is bringing to the party at its current level. Cleanup is doing a nice job. Let's go ahead and print it. This may have been fixed, but early versions would start your mix from wherever the scrub bar was left in Finalist. So I always make sure that it's at 0 before I start to generate my mix. It's also probably a good move to save the Finalist project changes we've made now. See over here it says 2022. That's important. Let's make note of that and then minimize reactor. So here in the arrangement view of Ableton, I'm going to insert an empty MIDI clip and make sure it's that length, 20 minutes, 22 seconds. We're going to make sure that whole thing is selected, because at this point, Finalist is along for the ride with your DAW, and your DAW will export whatever length of track you have selected. At least that's the way Ableton Live works. So, we are ready to export our Finalist mix. Again, we want to export selected tracks only. Check your settings to make sure you're at the right sampling rate and everything you want. And name it Kawazoi Tutorial Mix. I like to put this in the Finalist mix folder as well. And it will take a little while to chunk through that. But here it is, our Kawazoi Tutorial Mix WAV file. Now I'm going to go through one more optional step. I want to fade in and fade out on the mix we just made, but it's that really gentle, like river nature sound kind of stuff. I didn't do that in Finalist though, because I know from experience that its compressors and limiters and whatnot can do pretty strange things to very gentle fades. So I always do that by hand as a tiny bit of post-production. I'll just drag it right into my same Finalist mix project as a new audio track. I'll mute the reactor track temporarily since I don't want to hear it now. Build my fade in. Check that. Build my fade out. Check it. Great. Now just select the whole thing and export it using selected tracks only and call it something like Kawazoi Tutorial Mix Trimmed. And that is how I use Finalist to get nitpicky, nearly perfect mastered mixes. You still have to do all the groundwork, like level and EQ adjustments, but once you've done that, boy, Finalist sure makes things quick and easy. There's a link down below to Tim Exile's store where you can get Finalist and his other cool instruments and tools. Full disclosure, I'm an affiliate and will get a percentage of sales from that link. And there's a link below for the Finalist mix that we just did, the whole thing, if you're bored. I'll put it up on my Bandcamp page, and there will be another link for the video of me originally performing and recording Kawazoi to get the stems we've been playing with today. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and maybe hit like if this was helpful. I hope it was, and thanks for watching.